The current opioid epidemic is the deadliest drug crisis in this country's history, and every year the number of deaths rises. In 2017, 72,000 Americans died from ODs, and the vast majority of those were caused by some sort of opioid drug. There are a lot of causes of this epidemic: declining job prospects for the working class, the collapse of marriage and families, the suffocating loneliness generated by modern life. But good old-fashioned greed and moral turpitude from big business played a role, too. One of the key drugs behind the opioid tragedy is called Oxycontin. Oxycontin is a powerful and effective prescription painkiller. It's been a miracle for many cancer patients, but it's also very addictive. Thousands of Americans have received prescriptions for Oxycontin after surgery or for chronic pain and have wound up addicted to it. Since Oxycontin's release in 1996, 200,000 Americans have died of overdoses linked to prescription painkillers. That, for perspective, is almost twice this country's death toll in World War I. Oxycontin is produced by a company called Purdue Pharmaceutical. That company is owned by the Sackler family. Oxycontin has made the Sacklers one of this country's richest families. They're collectively worth about $13 billion. Now, new filings in a lawsuit in Massachusetts against members of the Sackler family showed just how far they were willing to go to get rich. Prior to the release of Oxycontin, Purdue Pharma argued that the drug was less addictive than other opioids because it was released gradually because of its packaging. They had no proof this was true, and of course it turned out not to be true at all. Oxycontin was and is, again, remarkably addictive, but it didn't matter. Purdue sales reps were told to claim the drug had an addiction risk of less than 1%. At the drug's launch, Richard Sackler boasted about how successful the drug would be. Quote, "The launch of Oxycontin tablets will be followed by a blizzard of prescriptions that will bury the competition. The prescription blizzard will be so deep, dense, and white." Well, he was right. That blizzard came, and people began to die. The Sacklers didn't appear to care. In 1997, Richard Sackler deduced that doctors were prescribing Oxycontin more often because they had the mistaken belief that it was weaker than morphine. In fact, Oxycontin is stronger than morphine. Purdue personnel were told to suppress this fact to keep the prescriptions flowing. In 2001, a federal prosecutor noted that 59 overdose deaths had occurred in his state alone. Sackler's response in an internal company memo, quote, "This is not too bad. It could have been far worse." The company refused to take responsibility for the people it was killing, so they went after the addicts themselves. In 2001, Richard Sackler said this in an internal memo, quote, "We have to hammer on abusers in every possible way. They are the culprits and the problem. They are reckless criminals," unquote. As the crisis worsened, Purdue continued to deny the addictiveness of their pills, saying the epidemic was simply a matter of immorality on the part of individual users. Meanwhile, year after year, the Sacklers kept pushing their company to sell more and more painkillers. Sales personnel were pressured to market Oxycontin to doctors for all kinds of ailments and at higher and more addictive doses. If prescriptions didn't rise fast enough, sales reps were threatened with termination. And of course, they got the message. Oxycontin salesmen held sometimes daily meetings with physicians, urging them to prescribe more and more Oxycontin. Several doctors the company lobbied eventually lost their licenses for malpractice for following this advice. When some of the more ethical doctors expressed concerns about addiction, the company placated them by saying their patients actually suffered from, quote, pseudo-addiction. That was in a condition they claimed could be treated with, you guessed it, more Oxycontin. Meanwhile, Raymond Sackler meddled with the company's advertisements. He was angry they didn't portray Oxycontin positively enough. Purdue only discontinued direct sales efforts for Oxycontin in February 2018, less than a year ago. How many lives might have been saved if they'd stopped earlier, or if they never lied at all? Those are pointless questions. Now they didn't care. They were getting rich.